Welcome to This Explainer. We all know Nikola Tesla as the absolute genius behind the modern electricity grid we use literally every single day. But today, we're exploring the shadows. We're going to dive into the hidden and honestly sometimes terrifying inventions that the source material claims were deliberately kept from the public. We're talking about the concepts and experiments that were just considered way too radical, or maybe way too dangerous, to ever see the light of day. Let's get right into it. So, let's kick things off with a pretty wild question from the source material. Can a device, small enough to literally fit right in your pocket, actually cause an earthquake? I mean, it sounds like pure science fiction, right? But the source documents a moment in history where this wasn't fiction at all. It was a terrifying reality that almost brought down an entire city block. To really understand this, we've got to go back in time. Picture this: New York City, 1896. The source details how Tesla was tinkering away in his lab and accidentally created what basically amounted to an earthquake generator. It started vibrating so intensely that his neighbors actually thought a massive natural earthquake was hitting the city, and they ran out into the streets in absolute panic. And it gets crazier. Tesla actually took this little pocket-sized oscillator out to a 10-story building that was under construction at the time, and he clamped it directly onto the bare steel frame. Well, within moments, that heavy steel started vibrating so violently that the panicked construction workers ran for their lives, and the police were immediately called in. Tesla admitted later in an interview that he had to physically smash the device with a hammer to get it off, and he said if he'd left it attached for just a little bit longer, that entire 10-story building would have completely collapsed into rubble. No way, right? Now here's the crucial point. Tesla wasn't actually trying to build a weapon here. He was just deeply obsessed with studying frequency and vibration. He spent most of his life looking at the entire world through this lens, trying to understand how these forces could travel through the solid Earth, kind of like how sound waves travel through the air. His ultimate grand goal was to decode these frequencies so he could transmit energy anywhere in the world, entirely without wires. You see, the source points out that our Earth actually vibrates naturally and constantly, somewhere between 7.83 and 33.8 hertz. Tesla had this wild theory that if he could just sync his tiny pocket oscillator to that exact natural frequency of the Earth, the compounding vibrations could actually trigger a catastrophic global earthquake. People totally mocked him for this, but he was tapping into a very real, very powerful physical phenomenon. We can actually demystify the science behind this using something you probably remember from middle school science class, the tuning fork phenomenon. So imagine you have two unconnected tuning forks, both set to 440 hertz. If you strike the first one, invisible sound waves travel through the air, and even though they aren't touching at all, that second fork just begins to vibrate automatically. Well, Tesla believed he could do the exact same thing with electrical energy, just using the Earth's natural vibrations to carry the power. And there's a famous quote that perfectly anchors his whole philosophy. He said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." As the source highlights, he literally viewed the entire world through the lens of these invisible connecting forces. He saw a planet where energy was just everywhere, waiting for us to tap into it. Now, before we look deeper into his suppressed ideas, we really have to acknowledge his massive credibility, because he wasn't just some guy making wild guesses. The source states that his alternating current and hydroelectric power systems are still foundational today. Just to put that into perspective, his hydroelectric systems still produce 31% of the modern electricity in the United States and a staggering 95% in China. He quite literally built the modern grid we rely on right now. Which brings us to Section 1, the fall of free energy, and how corporate interests clashed with wireless power. The source material outlines this massive clash between Tesla's visionary pursuit of free wireless energy for everyone and the very real, very powerful financial realities of the early 20th century. We see a huge conflict of interest here. On one side, we have Tesla's ultimate goal, transmitting free wireless energy using this massive 180-foot tower he built out in Colorado. But on the other side, you have his primary financier, J.P. Morgan. The source objectively points out that while Morgan initially funded Tesla with $150,000, Morgan was heavily invested in copper mines and the factories making electric wire insulation. That is the exact physical infrastructure that Tesla's wireless dream would completely make obsolete. So what happens? Well, the source explains that once Morgan realized the true potential of wireless energy, he saw a massive threat to his own copper wire monopoly. He immediately pulled his funding, which brought that expensive Colorado Tower project to a screeching halt. But he reportedly didn't stop there. He actively prevented other potential investors from supporting Tesla, which effectively killed the dream of free wireless electricity for good.
Moving right along to Section 2, terrifying untapped inventions, specifically the death ray and the thought camera. Because beyond free energy, Tesla was conceptualizing some creations that seriously sound like they belong in a sci-fi blockbuster.
50 million volts. That is just a staggering number. According to the source, in a 1934 interview, Tesla openly described a new electric weapon he had conceptualized that could generate that massive amount of power. He envisioned it as a devastating weapon of mass destruction, and the source even compares its scale to a nuclear bomb. To really illustrate this terrifying scale, the source compares it to a natural lightning strike. This theoretical beam weapon was said to be 166 times stronger than a natural lightning bolt. Tesla actually claimed this death ray could drop entire armies and take millions of lives from thousands of miles away, and that it was literally only limited by the curvature of the Earth itself. But while the death ray was undeniably terrifying, he also dreamed up something completely different: a thought camera. He actually believed that human thoughts created physical, visual reflections on the retina that could be photographed and displayed for anyone to see. Now, he never successfully built this machine, but the source points out an absolutely incredible fact. This exact line of thinking directly inspired the actual real-world invention of the X-ray in 1895. How wild is that? And that takes us to Section 3, the final mystery. A world without oil wars? When you look back at the last century, you really do have to wonder how the entire course of human history might have shifted. The source raises this really fascinating, neutral observation about the true cost of fossil fuels. Over the last 150 years, major global conflicts, from targeting oil reserves in World War I and II right up to the Gulf and Iraq wars, have heavily centered on the demand and control of oil. And the source poses a pretty profound what-if. This reality, and the massive loss of life that came with it, might have been entirely avoided if we had just tapped into Earth's natural frequencies to provide free energy, exactly like Tesla envisioned.
But as we know, that alternate reality never happened. By January 7, 1943, despite literally inventing the modern electrical grid, holding hundreds of patents and having the capacity to be one of the richest men alive, Tesla refused to operate just for the money. He died completely penniless in his hotel room on this date, unable to even pay his final hotel bill.
Which leaves us with one massive unanswered question to close out our explainer today. Right after his death, government officials swooped in, seized all of his research, his documents, and his belongings, and held on to them for a full decade. The source leaves us wondering, after locking up those files for 10 years, has all of Tesla's secret frequency data and wireless formulas truly been released to the public? Or is the ultimate key to free energy still hidden away in some dark corner? It's a mystery that really leaves you questioning everything we know about power, and it makes you wonder, are the greatest discoveries in history the ones we just never get to see?